Hey, welcome to another episode of Hell If We Know, Sexy Edition. I'm calling it that because we talk about Song of Solomon in this one, not because of anything that you wouldn't want it to be because of, unless you wouldn't want it to be because of that, which is fair. Things to know. Number one, at one point Chris references an earlier discussion about Beyblade that didn't make the final cut because it went on for too long and wasn't at all relevant. So sorry about that, that explains that. Thing to know number two, get rid of all the children near you, because this is the sexy episode. Song of Solomon is pretty much inevitable that things and adult themes will come up, so even though the profanity is still burped out, you know, if you don't want anyone around you to hear the word sex, it's too late. I've said it too many times in this intro, but we'll say it again, so just be ready for that. Other than that, that's really kind of all you need to know. The rest of it is just good. Enjoy it.
Okay, so we were just talking about the net neutrality maybe being repealed, probably being repealed, unfortunately. Yeah. And I was just going to say, it's actually way easier. So we were talking about corporations actually having the power instead of the people, man. And one of the things I was looking up, it's public information who, like which congressman and which like representative of your state supports what cause and like who they get money from to do their campaigns and everything. And so that's public information. It's easy to access and it's easy to find out like which corporations support which congressman and which representative and things like that. And it's actually way easier than you think to like buy a congressman.
Really?
I mean, some of these congressmen go for like $5,000 a year, and like really like pretty small increments of money like that. I guess when I think of corporations giving money to politicians to make choices in their best interest, I think of like deals made in the millions, deals made in like 6 digits. Yeah. But like the information that I've been looking up, like you can buy one for a couple $1,000s. Some of them even like the states that don't really matter, which I don't know why you'd buy them anyway, like Rhode Island or something. They can go for as little as like $1,500.
Oh, nice.
You just slip them a couple thousand, and they'll make whatever choice you want them to make. Sweet. So I think here on the Hell If We Know podcast, we should start a Patreon.
I was just thinking that.
All of our donations go to
corrupting
buying
politicians.
A congressman. Yeah. You're right, buying a congressman. And what are some of the choices we would make with a congressman under our belt?
Oh, well, we would definitely fix the whole net neutrality issue. Man, they just sprung this on me. I haven't even thought about what I would do if I controlled a congressperson.
First order of business would be Hell If We Know t-shirts for everybody.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Especially him. Whenever he makes a talk, he'd have to be wearing like a nice blazer, of course, to look the part. Right. But underneath, he'd have our logo.
So not really looking the part, though.
Okay, so half the part. Yeah. Dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Exactly, and everyone wants to be a host on the Hell If We Know podcast.
That's right.
Let me think. Oh, man, this feels like when you're being interviewed for, like, class president in 6th grade. Like, what would you do? I'd be like, I'd make the vending machines cheaper.
Longer lunch for everybody.
Exactly.
Acne medication for anyone who needs it.
Right. So, yeah, if you give us your money, this is the kind of stuff that will happen.
Yeah, easy fixes, people. All we need is about $1,500 to buy the congressman or the representative of Rhode Island, and so if we garner enough capital for that, then you can be sure that the Rhode Island congressman or representative, whatever that political system is, I don't really understand it, but you can be sure that there will be mac and cheese, longer lunches, and acne medication for everybody, and perhaps a Hell If We Know t-shirt.
And let me just say here right now, if everyone listening to this donated $5, we would get at least $25. And that would go probably about 1/100th of the way towards funding our goal. So consider donating a lot more than that. It's worth a thought.
When you got your first job, did you like look at your paychecks in terms of how many of something that was? Like let me explain this. So like when I got my first job, I was working at a Mediterranean restaurant in North Carolina, and I would make like I think I worked like 25 hours a week or something, and you get paid every 2 weeks. And so every 2 weeks I would get a paycheck that was around like $250 to $300, which even still to me now, like that's a sizable amount of money. Not obviously for like a full-time job, but it was a part-time job. So like I was getting like $300 every 2 weeks, and I would look at that in terms of how many Xbox games that would buy me. Right. So I'd be like, whoa, like $300 divided by 60 per Xbox game. Like, that's this many games. That's incredible. Like, I just like made some pitas for a couple of weeks, and they just give me a bunch of Xbox games. That's how I saw the world. And
that's beautiful.
And I wish I could. I know, it's so innocent and naive. I wish I could still see the world like that.
Right. Now, I do remember when I was getting my allowance when I was a little John boy. I got $1 a week for doing chores and stuff. And I did think, okay, so like every 2 months I can buy a new Bionicle on that, was like how I looked at it.
Dude.
Oh, yeah.
Bionicles, yes. I was gonna say another thing, another like weird middle school fad that was also like slightly international that I was into was like competitive cup stacking. Do you know about this?
Oh, I remember that. I never did it, but I saw it.
Oh man, I was super into it for like one whole summer. That's like all I did. I had like this special mat that you stack the cups on. I had of course like the regulation cups. If you don't know about this game, it's there's like 11 plastic cups that come in a sleeve. And in each of the plastic cups is 3 holes on the bottom. So obviously they're not for drinking, but you stack them in like pyramids, and then you unstack them really fast, and you see like how fast you can get them all up and down, and then you time yourself. And I was super into that for like one summer, and I got really, really good at it too. And that's one of those things that's also still like pretty big over here in Korea. Like
really?
A lot of kids are like into cup stacking. Yeah, we had like a Halloween like indoor field trip last month, and cup stacking was like one of the centers that the kids could go to.
Right.
And they were all like, they immediately took to it. Like, in Airplane when you know in Airplane when the main character teaches the guys the like tribe in Africa how to play basketball, and they just pick it up like immediately.
Oh yeah, it was like that.
Yeah, so this is like that. Like I taught these kids, I like showed them the basics of how to cup stack, and within like seconds they were all professionals. And I was like, this is just like in their blood. Good for them.
Amazing. I do remember, all I really remember about cup stacking was there was this commercial that came on Disney Channel all the time, and it was to buy like the regulation cups, and that was it. It was like I saw this commercial all the time, and I hated the sport instantly because it literally just seemed like they were selling you 11 solo cups. Like that's all it was.
But they have holes in the bottom. That's
apparently they have holes in the bottom. But like for me, it just seemed like the dumbest thing. But I never gave it a shot.
Aerodynamics.
Right. So it's really scientific and important and totally cool.
Dude, one of the best electronic music samples ever came from cup stacking. Do you know that? What is the Skrillex song? I think it's Cinema. I think it's the one where right at the drop, you hear the sample that goes, "Yes, oh my God." You know that one?
No, man, sorry.
I guess you don't know anything about EDM.
Really
Anybody
don't.
who listens to EDM will get that reference. But that sample is from a YouTube video of a Korean girl cup stacking, and she breaks her own record, and like on camera she's like so excited, and she's like, "Yes, oh my God." And then Skrillex took that sample and like made a song with it, and then a bunch of other people did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's why cup stacking is cool.
Right, that does seem like a cool dropping the beat sample thing to use.
Oh, you don't know anything about EDM.
Yeah, I don't know
That's
anything
adorable.
about cup stacking. I don't know anything about EDM.
We are way out of your comfort zone. I apologize. Let's talk
totally
about something
fine.
you want to talk about.
Right. Well, I want to talk about your record in our fantasy football league.
Oh my God. Okay, let me defend myself before you attack me.
All right, go ahead.
Those are soccer terms, right? Defend and attack.
Well, we're talking about football, but yes.
Oh God,
It's
I always
pretty
forget.
much any sport, honestly.
This is why I'm so bad at fantasy. Is it football?
Yeah, it's football we're doing.
Okay, this is why I'm so bad at fantasy football. I literally thought we were playing soccer for the first 9 weeks, and I also I haven't been keeping up with my team. I think my team's name is basketball, so we're just over the board in terms of who's doing what. And I was unaware that I am 0-11 now, or 0-10.
You're 0-11. Yep. You're
I'm
8 out of 8.
Which is listen, it's not great. My team needs a better coach. We need to practice more. We need to keep our eyes more focused on the tall yellow Y shapes, and we need to run the ball and maybe do some laterals too, which is a term that I learned just last week while on the football subreddit.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a rarely used one, but yeah.
Look at me.
Nice.
Well,
That's deep
why
football
don't you tell the listeners how terribly I'm doing? Because I don't even know the half of it.
Yeah, so I'll go and say Chris isn't the only one who doesn't pay any attention to his team. Most of our league didn't even show up for the draft and just auto-drafted and has never touched their lineup at all. And he's the only one without a single win. He's 8th for 8. Just doing it terrible, having a bad time all around. But it's nice. It's really a big relief for the rest of the league because it's like you get a bye week every now and then. It's like, I'm up against Chris. That'll help my stats.
Yeah, so I'm really I'm the playmaker. I make everyone else look good.
I don't think that's what a playmaker does. Well, I guess that is what a playmaker does, isn't it?
Listen, if I
Now
learned
I'm the dumb
anything,
one. Yeah, sorry.
if I learned anything from High School Musical, it's that the playmaker is the person who makes everyone else look good.
Was Troy the playmaker?
Troy was the playmaker.
Wasn't he the one that was like always looking good though?
Yeah, but he also helped the team look good. So I'm like the bad version of a playmaker because I like everyone looks good at my expense.
Right, a good playmaker just raises like a rising tide, lifts all shifts or whatever.
Yeah, but I'm like Poseidon. I raise the tide, and then I
You're
also
at the
like
very bottom of
I
the
sink
ocean.
into the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But it is a glorious title. You kind of giving yourself that Poseidon thing, though. That's generous.
Yeah. Silver lining, right?
Yeah, I guess so. If you want to claim that for yourself, that works.
That's about all I have to claim at this point.
Fair enough. So at this point, I'd like to introduce a new segment that I don't really have a name for, but it's going to be about dead pigeons and other such amendments.
Oh my goodness. Is there an amendment to my dead pigeon theory?
There is an amendment to your dead pigeon theory.
Stop talking to people. Stop talking to people who refute my assertions.
I don't even bring
like
it up.
them.
I never bring it up. People just text me. They're like, hey, I was listening to the podcast. This is the only way I know my friends listen to this podcast is sometimes they'll text me, be like, Chris was wrong about this. But,
oh boy. It's always
yeah.
me too, isn't it?
No, my friend Mac, I'll mention some of his stuff too in a minute. He corrected both of us. But yeah, so my friend Jean, she texted me a picture of a dead pigeon, and it took me a minute to realize why she sent me that. But then I remembered, oh yeah, Chris said there are no dead pigeons. So we have photographic evidence. Yeah.
Did she just Google image that? Because I'm sure you can Google image anything and come up with it.
Right. I didn't want to... I'm not sure. Probably, but that's left up in the air right now. Could be Photoshopped even.
I'm sure it was Photoshopped.
Okay. Right.
You personally, and your friend, is it Jean?
Yeah, Jean.
Yeah, your friend Genetics2 also has never seen a dead pigeon, and I guarantee it. The point is, your friend named Pants has never seen a dead pigeon personally, and that's the end of the Durchsagen right there.
Gotcha. But the fact is, if you send us an email at HellifWeKnowPodcast@gmail.com, we will send you a picture of the dead pigeon. I didn't want to post it on our Instagram, but I figure it's very relevant to what we talk about, so if you send a request for it, or if you DM us at HellifWeKnow, we'll send you the picture of the dead pigeon.
Make sure to write in the subject line, this is what Chris had wrong this week.
Got you. Yeah, that's important that we keep track of all of that. Another thing you got wrong, specifically about flying rodents, is that you said bats aren't cute, and my friend Savannah showed me a video of a bat eating a banana. So if you email us at HellifWeKnowPodcast@gmail.com, did we bring it up, or did I just talk to you about it? I don't think we mentioned it on the podcast.
We no, not this specific video, but I mentioned as a cross-examination of my point. I was like, yes, I've seen the videos of cute bats eating mangoes and bananas and fruits and stuff, but that doesn't mean they're not terrifying. That doesn't mean they're not terrifying in every other aspect. Look, lots of things look cute when they eat. Have you ever seen a raccoon try to wash its food before it eats it? Adorable.
Yeah, it's cute.
But you come in contact with one of those things in real life outside of a raccoon cafe. And
I was about to say.
those things are feral animals with people hands, and they want to scratch your face off.
Sometimes.
All right, well, we're straying from the topic here.
Okay, yeah. So we'll drop the bat thing. Just know that that's still up in contention. Let's see, what else are we going to have? What else did we have? I was going to say, a lot of our previous banana talk has been amended, specifically about monkeys eating bananas through the skin. And a lot of that credit goes to Katie. I just wanted to give her credit for that because I'm giving everyone credit for the amendments we've made. So that was my friend Katie that mentioned that.
Why don't you have Katie co-host the podcast?
Dude, that would be great. She's fun time.
Katie sounds like a real great person.
She knows a lot more about monkeys than you do, and I feel like that's really holding us back. So
why don't you start a monkey podcast with Katie?
I'll do that. Katie, if you're listening to this, offer is up for you to start a monkey podcast with me. We'll call it.
You can. Me and my friend Katie, two baboons.
I don't like that name at all.
That's too long.
Yeah, that's a terrible name.
Two silly monkeys, and it's just the logo is just a picture of your faces.
I'd like that even less. Well, we'll come back to that. We'll come up with a good name. Probably Katie will think of a good name because she's better at thinking of things than you are. Anyway, my friend Mac had a lot of corrections. The first thing Mac said was that in the second episode, he says that you say that God didn't say, hey, don't talk to the snake. But apparently in the Quran, they do believe that God directly said to Adam that there was an evil being that they shouldn't talk to. And they called it the Iblis, and they shouldn't listen to him. So apparently they didn't specifically say a snake or anything, but in the Quran interpretation of the whole like Genesis story in the Garden of Eden, there was a command not to listen to this thing that would try to trick you.
Oh, and did I say in that episode that no one told them not to listen to the snake?
Yeah, I think the context was like we were talking about like how it's kind of ridiculous that the whole thing came up and they had no idea what to do about it. Like all of a sudden there's a snake, and you were like,
right.
yeah, no one said like, hey, don't listen to a snake, look out for that. But apparently in the Muslim tradition they do have that. But
okay,
we didn't know that. Yeah, but that's good to know. That's a good addition.
This segment is really lowering my self-esteem like into the ground.
Yeah.
I know the premise of the podcast is that it's okay not to know stuff, but there's a lot of stuff I don't know.
Right. Well, I didn't know any of this either, so we're in it together.
Okay.
Right. So another thing Mac had was for episode 4, we talked about life sentences and how that was weird and how you can get multiple life sentences and all that. And apparently a life sentence just is a specific minimum number of years, like 25 or 30, but maybe up to 50. But it's more like that symbolic idea. It was like, okay, they'll probably die in jail if we give them this sentence.
So somebody has a life sentence of 25 years, which is just like their expected life remainder. Is that it?
I don't know if that's the exact number, but yeah, it's like that. Like life sentence just means such and such years, and so generally that means they'll die in prison.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a confusing term.
I had a really good segue when we were talking about Beyblade's Let It Rip, and so I'd like to just quickly hark back to that so that I can make this this great transition.
Oh yeah, Beyblades, let them rip. I said
Farts.
let them rip. That wasn't rip. Farts, okay. That was
Farts,
such a
you
natural
also
transition.
let rip. You also let farts rip.
That's good, yeah.
And and I wanted to say that I think it's really cruel that in all schools, like across the world, in all the schools that I've been to, all schools, the chairs are hard. And it's really difficult to fart secretly in a hard chair. Now, on the other hand, if you fart secretly in a cushioned chair, you can kind of muffle it, or you can let it rip softly, like a careless whisper almost. But in all the schools that I've been to, where like farts are wont to happen, they're always in hard chairs, and it's really hard to hide a hard chair fart.
Oh yeah. Do you have a solution? Was this a build up to your grand finale, or was it just like something we can all relate to?
So
I could definitely relate to it.
Right, me too. And that's the thing, is like everybody can kind of, see themselves having farted into a hard chair, and everybody turns to them and you're like, oh, it was just a chair squeak, I just moved a little bit, or like it was the dog who's not in the room right now, or something like that. But so a possible solution is a lot of classes now will let you bring like a pillow to sit on. I don't know if you've seen this yourself, but like in a lot of the schools that I've worked in, you're allowed to like bring your own little like chair pillow to sit on, and just to like make your day more comfortable. And I think that's a good solution. But I think it should be standardized. I think everybody should have a cushioned chair, and it should be okay to fart and just sort of go about your day pretending that it didn't happen. Because as body positive as we often are as a society now, I think farts are not something even in the next 100 years that I can see becoming socially acceptable. Except it isn't. It is actually in China. But I don't like it to happen here or around me at all. And so chair pillows should be standardized is the main point I'm making.
Okay, I like that. It eliminates the class struggle of those who can afford to bring a pillow to their chair and those who cannot. So I like that socialist egalitarianism that you're propagating here. I'm a full-on proponent of that.
Well, I didn't mean to go that far with it. I just think we should all fart silently.
I think it's clear what your intentions are, and Bernie 2020...
Is this the official stance of the podcast?
I think so, yeah.
Do you think he's going to run again?
I don't know, man. I don't think so. I think he's too old. But, I mean, because that was everyone's complaint the first time around, is like, oh, he's going to die for sure before he gets inaugurated. But, I mean, obviously he's alive now. But, I mean, there's still, like, that looming sense that he could perish at any moment.
Yeah. And, like, honestly, I think he was, like, just as old as, or maybe even just around the same age as Hillary and Donald when they were all running together. Yeah. But he looks the part. Like Hillary looks like she looks like a robot, first of all, but she looks like a robot who has had a lot of work done and, like, looks okay for her age. Donald is on a different plane of existence. Bernie looks like somebody his age and maybe older, and it also, his accent is just like, it doesn't help the matter. He just sounds like an old grandpa.
He certainly does. And I'm sure, like, with the whole, like, he's always yelling and waving his arms around, He's the type
Yeah.
of candidate that you're like, oh, he's gonna have heart troubles, and that's gonna be the end of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Like, you just get that vibe from him. Hillary's so calm because of her robotic distance, but like, which, you know, isn't necessarily a weakness, but it definitely like makes her seem younger because she doesn't seem like she's about to clutch her chest and keel over.
Right. Bernie definitely seems like he'd be standing at a podium, bird perched upon the podium,
Right.
and he'd be preaching about, there's too many Werther's originals in this world, and I want all of them for myself. And he'd just keel over right there after popping one too many.
Yeah. That was his message, was he wants things all to himself.
No, he wants Werther's originals also.
Specifically the rest of it was very
all do.
socialist. But with that one thing.
Well, so you're right. Maybe his message would be the antithesis of that. Maybe it would be, I want everybody in the world to have a Werther's original for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. It should not be government mandated how many Werther's originals and boxes of cookies or sewing supplies you have in your house.
There you go. Classic. That sounds like him. So, one thing, I've been getting this feedback pretty regularly, is that we just stray off topic and ramble about things that aren't the point of the episode too much. So I'm ready to dive in if you're ready to dive in.
Okay, yeah. We're going to talk about heaven this week. Is that right?
Nope.
Oh, all right. What are we going to talk about?
Song of Solomon.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you did tell me about this. I'm ready to learn.
Okay, cool. So, first off, I just wanted to start by, I want to sing you, or not, I'm not going to sing anything. I'm just going to read it to you. So here's what I wanted to read to you. How fair and pleasant you are, O beloved one, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its branches. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. So how did that make you feel?
Can I reply with the song?
Yeah, you can.
So what that made me think of immediately was The Joker by the Steve Miller Band. I really love your peaches, wanna shake your tree.
Oh, yeah. Shoot, that's a really good comparison.
I think this was like the precursor to that song. Maybe this is where the Steve Miller Band got that lyric.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I was going to say, it also reminds me of 40 Day Dream by Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. Have you heard that one?
Sure haven't.
It talks about, in the first line, he says, she's got gold doorknobs where her eyes used to be. One turn and I learned what it really means to see. And then later a verse he says, she got jumper cable lips. She's got sunset on her breath. I inhale just a little bit. Now I've got no fear of death. Which I like those lines a lot more than I like these lines. But the same really like weird imagery about it, like jumper cable lips and stuff, is like, it's great.
Wow, I really like that.
Yeah, no, Edward Sharpe, if you want some good lyrics, man, I mean, that's one of my favorite songs by them, probably by a long shot, actually. But just in general, they're really great. Okay,
so are you asking me how I felt about that? How I felt about that passage?
So going back to the original passage that reminds both of us of these two songs, what does it evoke in you?
It definitely, if somebody read that to me and said, guess what book this is from, I would not have guessed the Bible. That sounds like a Shakespearean sonnet. It sounds, of course, not in cadence or in rhythm or anything, but in the words used. And I that was very sensual, and I liked it a lot, especially coming from the smooth as honey voice of Jonathan Freeman.
Oh dear, now I'm blushing. My whole body just turned red, and you'll never know if it's true because this is a podcast. Anyway, yeah, no, that's actually, whenever I read Song of Solomon, maybe it's because I already know, like, I think of it as like Bible. I'm always like, this is the weirdest. I don't like this, but that's cool that you like it. That's yeah, nice. So I will say a little bit of background, or I guess background. So this is also called the Song of Songs, which means like in that culture and in that time when they said the something was the something of that somethings, it basically just meant it was the best of all of that. So the idea was like this was the best song ever written in that Hebraic culture.
Are you saying song or psalm like psalm?
Song like modern la 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 like that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So this is the Song of Songs.
Yeah. Also called the Song of Solomon because it is attributed to King Solomon even though he didn't write it. Okay,
but they're not talking about his breasts, right?
Right, no. It's him. So the whole thing covers this like basically love story between this one rich guy and this one maiden, and how they're like all falling in love and they're bumping their nasties and rubbing around on each other. And then they're like, oh, be careful though. And then it's like, oh, I love you so much. And then it's like, I love you so much. And it's just like 4 or 5 chapters of that.
Oh, that's adorable. I'm glad they put that in the Bible.
Yeah, it's really sweet, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's there's a lot of... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It was just a nice little romantic break from... Is this Old Testament or New Testament?
Old Testament.
Oh, definitely a good placement there. Nice job, Jesus, who wrote the Bible. Definitely good authorial placement there, because it sort of breaks up all the fire and brimstone that plagues the original Old Testament.
The original Old Testament. But yeah,
I mean, like, the rest of the Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, this is in a series of, it's called, like, the Wisdom books. So you've got, like, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Lamentations, all that kind of stuff. It's none of it's, like, as historical. It's more just, like, here's some wisdom and some poetry sort of stuff for you. So it falls in with all of that section of the Old Testament. So it's not really a break from anything.
Okay, well, I still like that it's there.
Yeah, it is nice. But it's also a huge, like, kind of controversial thing, because everyone wants to interpret it differently. I mean, obviously, it's a book that's about love, and it definitely expresses, like, sexual relation in it. And so you've got a lot of people leading in the church saying, like, okay, well, let's be careful how we interpret this, because sex is the devil's handiwork, and if we do it, it's going to be... Obviously, sex is the bane of our species' existence, not how we proliferate and propagate and continue to exist. It's the worst thing ever. Right. So... yeah, it's handled very delicately because of that, and often neglected. And there's also a few other neat things about it. There's one thing is that there's no mention of God in the entire book, which is another reason nobody really talks about it, is because it's sort of this idea of like, okay, well, if this book isn't about God, why is it even in the Bible? Like, obviously we shouldn't care about it, like, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of people just neglect it because they feel like it's not a real book of the Bible. They just, or even if they would say so on paper, a lot of people treat it that way.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what, like, when they did do, what was that conference called where they chose what was canonized and what wasn't?
Council of Carthage.
Council of Carthage. When they did that, it makes you wonder, like, why do they choose to not include things like Jesus' childhood and yes, include things like this, which really, at least on my surface level, have nothing to do with God?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very valid question. Because there's no mention of God. There's no sort of setup where it's like, oh, and this is a divine vision that Solomon received or whatever. The entire thing is just like a little love song that everyone said is like, wow, what a great love song. And then they put it in sacred text. Oh, and I think I have a note here. I took these notes a while ago, so some of them I'm not sure what they are talking about. But I have this note here that says Mormons don't approve. So I'm not sure what I was reading that made me write that down, but maybe it's not in their canon for the Book of Mormon.
I do think this sounds like something that Mormons wouldn't approve of, because it's very openly sexual, and Mormons are kind of they're like the antithesis of that.
Right, they're all virgins.
Right, all of them, even the ones with 10 wives.
Right,
but. Yeah, I didn't really have anywhere else to go with that thought. Just that it seems like something Mormons would be against. But I mean, come on, like it's a nice song.
Yeah, it is. But so it still sort of leaves that question of like, how are we supposed to interpret this? Like, what are we to make with this story? Like, it's not even a story. I guess it's kind of a story, but it's just like a little love song. What's it got to do with us or about God? And so there's a lot of different ways people take it.
Yeah, so give me what you think first, and then give me what you think or what you've seen other people say about it.
Okay, so I think a couple of things. I think the reason it's considered sacred scripture, and the reason it was canonized, and the reason that it can still be like interpreted in a religious way today. I mean, there's this consistent metaphor in a lot of scripture that compares. In the Old Testament, they talk about how, you know, the Jewish people are in covenant relationship with God. And then in the New Testament, there's about the church being the bride of Christ. So that idea of like a romantic married relationship is like a consistent image that just sort of demonstrates that like intense, like burning commitment that God has for us, and the way that we should reciprocate that and offer our everything unto God. So that's like the biblical, like very religious look at it. Aside from that, I think it does also have like, just in a like very secular way that can be taken by anyone. I think it's got like a little bit of a message about like love and, loving someone well, and just the way we approach love, because obviously that's a question that has permeated through society and art forever and ever, and is still confusing people today, is like, how do we handle this like intense, strong emotion that's unlike anything else that humanity ever encounters, and obviously it's ruined lives and it's made lives wonderful. And I think this song is sort of just an example of like love that is loved well, and the relationship that is done well between two people who love each other well.
So you said between two people. Do you think this is about between two people, or do you think this is about like the marriage, like you said, of a man to church, or like God to human?
Right. I think it's just a love song about two people. And
Okay.
part of that is because it resembles a lot of other poems from like pre-Israelite times. Like I think there was one poem in particular that came out of Egypt, and it's been like present in other cultures. It's just kind of like made the circuits in that region, I guess, that it was just like a love poem. And so I think that was just what it was at the time, and then we sort of like read this religious imagery into it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing to do. I mean, I do that all the time sometimes with like songs that don't necessarily have anything to do with religion, but I'll read my own religion into it a little bit and be like, oh, I know what they were talking about because it's how I feel about religion, and that's obviously not what the song is about, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to do.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of postmodern reading, is you can, separation of author from script, and you can interpret whatever meaning you want and was never originally intended for it.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say, is like, especially a lot of artists that I look up to will say about their own art is like, once they publish it, it's not really theirs anymore. It's the people's. Like, you're just the conduit to bring it into the world and let society have it. So yeah, and the church has taken it and commandeered it and made it into something really meaningful for a lot of people, and helped it survive in a way that even if you don't relate to it on a religious level, I don't really like the song at all, but I mean, it is obviously super dated. You can't really hold that same standard of poetry to it. But
have you heard it sung before?
No, that was the thing. Actually, when I was doing research, I tried really hard to find a recording of it, and I haven't. There apparently was some composer who did a bunch of like psalms and other like sacred texts and put them to music, and just did this really long orchestral thing with all of it, but I couldn't find a recording of it, and especially not at least of that section of it, because it was apparently a really long piece.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to hear.
Yeah, I wonder what language they would sing it in though too, because obviously I guess the original language would have been something else entirely. I don't even know.
Yeah, would it have been Hebrew or Aramaic?
Not Aramaic. The version that we would have, so like the Septuagint, which I think I might be misremembering that term, but I think the Septuagint was like the Greek collection of Hebraic texts, and that's where most of our translations come from in English, is we translated the Septuagint.
Okay.
Although I think we've also found some of the original Hebrew scripts. I don't really know. But so I think the original language that this would have appeared in like the Old Testament when it was circulating around amongst Jews of the time, would have been Hebrew. But I mean, like I said, I think the poem itself comes from before that, so I'm not really sure what the original language would have been.
And so what do critics or other people say about this song?
So I've also heard it be expressed as sort of a cautionary tale of like, make sure, like, it's sort of a premarital sex message, even though it seems that these two people aren't married and it seems that they are having sex. But there is this motif that comes up again and again through the book about like, the lady has like her handmaidens come up and like do a little chorus every now and then, and they say, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not stir up love till it is ready." And that's my impression of ancient Hebraic handmaiden singing. But I thought it was pretty good.
The best part about stirring up love before it's ready, just like the best part of baking a cake, is licking the bowl before it's baked.
I guess so.
You gotta lick that bowl clean, even if you might get salmonella from the eggs.
Right.
I mean, use protection, but lick that bowl clean.
I would not necessarily say the same thing. For me, I don't even disagree with the not stirring up love till it's ready. I just disagree with the idea of what ready love is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think, like, to me, this couple in this book seems ready. They're so devoted to one another, like just committed to that relationship and to their love. Like that feels ready to me. I skimmed the book. I'll admit that I didn't really peruse the whole thing, but I skimmed the book when I was reading up to this, and their relationship goes great. They have a great time and the song ends, and they're happy. So maybe it's like a rom-com where it ends, and then the ending, post-ending, is where everyone's like, well, obviously that relationship wasn't a healthy relationship. They're probably going to get divorced. Like, this isn't realistic. Maybe there's a little bit of that with this, but to me, it seems like they're saying don't stir up love till it's ready, but these two seem ready.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, some people might say that they need 6 seasons in a movie to fully understand the relationship between these two people, but I think just at least the window that we've seen of their relationship sounds beautiful. Go for it.
Exactly. And I will say another interpretation that I only heard or read a little bit about was that apparently there's a lot of garden imagery in the song. Just talking about, like, she gets described as a tree. They talk about meeting in this garden. There's all sorts of stuff that centers around the garden. And there is a theory that relates to the Garden of Eden, and talking about how it's sort of this restorative love and relationship between God and humanity where we return to the garden and all is perfect. And I don't know if it is just like an idealization of heaven or of the this wouldn't have been about the return of Christ because this is Old Testament, but whatever it is, it's about basically
well, I could see it being about, like, I mean a lot of sexual imagery is always attached to we'll call it botanical imagery, like stuff pertaining to gardens and things like that, like, planting your seed and watching love grow just like a relationship grows, blooming and flowers and all that sort of thing seems very seems biblical and sexual and botanical all in one, which are my favorite 3 adjectives.
Botanical's a good one. But speaking of biblical, that was actually something I wanted to discuss specifically with this episode. Is like, so we've got this book of the Bible that is weird, and one thing I hear people, especially, obviously Christians, say a lot is, like, when they're defending an idea, is like, is this idea biblical or not? So what does a book like this have to say about the very notion of biblical? Like, what is and isn't biblical? What does it mean for something to be biblical? If this is biblical, which it is, it's in the Bible, I don't know what other definition of biblical you can muster. This is biblical.
I would think biblical means of or pertaining to the Bible, which this fits that definition.
About as much as it can.
I think a lot of people probably view biblical as a much more narrow definition, which is like, it has to be about the teachings of Christ, and it has to be about love others as you love thyself, and treat others the way you want to be treated, and also burn down an entire city with sulfur if you don't like the way they're acting.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's I think I don't have a conclusion about this, but I think this is just, I think it's worth our time as people of the book, which is, I don't know if I can use that term. Anyway, it's worth our time as people who relate to sacred texts of any kind. It's worth our time as faithful people. It's worth our time as discerning people of any sort to consider, if we're going to use a word like biblical, and if we're going to relate ourselves to notions in terms of whether or not they are biblical, to challenge our definition of biblical and to try to understand, if we're going to say, is this or isn't this biblical, what does that mean to us? Does it even need to mean anything? Because I don't think that term means anything at all.
You don't think the term biblical means anything?
I think it means it's in the Bible, which, like, what is it?
Yeah.
So there's so much stuff in the Bible.
Right. Okay. So I think you said earlier, your little soundbite said, you said challenge the definition of the term biblical, which I really like that, because I think that's what probably this passage is doing, and that's probably what a lot of people who read the Bible should do. I don't want to sound preachy, but that's what readers of the Bible should do, is challenge their definition of what they think biblical means, and accept that it's not just, the surface level, be good and do nice things for other people stuff that we normally think. I think probably the Bible is written, much of it as a historical documentation of how people lived at that time and how it might relate to how people live now. And so biblical could just mean like humanitarian, or like it just, record keeping of what it's like to be human at different times. And just then, the same as it is now, love and sex and passion and songs about women being related to fruits and gardens are just as relevant in any time period. And I just think that's a definition of biblical that's interesting to examine.
Yeah, I love that. I agree completely. And I think that's one thing we haven't put this phrase to it, but that's something that's come up a lot in this podcast. And I think I'm glad to be able to really connect that, is that idea that like just because something's in the Bible doesn't mean it's an example. It doesn't mean it's a moral story at all. It just means it's in the Bible. And like almost every episode we've had, we've been like, yeah, no, this isn't an example of how to live. You don't get your father drunk and rape him. You don't sick the she-bears on the youths. You don't.
No, I mean that one I disagree with. You sick the she-bears on the youths if they call you bald. I'm still on that. I'm still on that platform.
Fair point. That one's up for interpretation. But yeah, so I think I wanted to make that sort of a moral point of this, and just really, not moral necessarily, but a philosophical point, like challenge your concepts, really know what you're talking about when you speak, bother with semantics, do the work. Yeah.
That, in the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I got to say about that.
Cool. Yeah, so just to sum up some more points about the book. So it's about lust and love a lot. It seems to convey the message you don't want to doink people who don't care about you very much, because you got to wait till that love is ready and mature. In whatever that may end up meaning for you. In this book, sex is totally affirmed and enjoyed. There doesn't seem to be any sense of celibacy being celebrated in this book. It definitely treats sex as a gift from God and part of creation and something to be engaged with. And something that also gets really neglected in this book that I forgot to mention earlier, the woman is totally relevant and empowered in every aspect of this relationship, like equal to the man in the whole book. Like her feelings are portrayed and valued. Her actions are like relevant and considered. In so many of the stories we've looked at so far, that obviously hasn't been the case.
A woman being empowered and honored rather than being subservient and cast aside as property rather than a person.
Yeah, and especially in like a romantic and sexual relationship, like having her say be so relevant in it, like that's something that society needs to re-examine these days.
Right. In just our episode last week or the week before about Sodom and Gomorrah, there's just as much evidence there. If you want to be the who interprets the Bible literally, then you can use that passage and be like, well, Lot gave away his daughters to be raped, and so that means it's okay to rape. But then you look at this passage. I know, but you look at this passage and it says the antithesis of that, which is that women should be honored and held up and respected, and their choices should be just as valued as anyone else's. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And so I want to end this sort of on a question then. Okay. Which I think we're going to come to the same answer with this. If the listeners want to bring up any different viewpoints, I'd love to hear it. But this is sort of the question that surrounds this book whenever it's in discussion. But does it deserve to be canonized? Is this a sacred text, do you think?
Is that the same question? Does it deserve to be canonized, and is it a sacred text?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think the Bible needs stuff like this so that we'll call it liberal, even though attaching like current political definitions to 1,000-year-old books is probably not the best idea. But we'll call it a liberal text, and I'm glad that they included a slightly more Bernie-leaning, left-leaning script into this Bible, which often has interpretations that are more right-leaning.
Yeah. And I will say this is entirely through my perspective and my interpretation, so you may have gotten a much more liberal reading of this passage than others would give you. So my bias is totally present in that. But I agree completely, since you said the things that I said, and I really value those things as well. So I agree. I think it needs to be examined in a more open mindset, and it needs to be examined, period, since everyone just kind of ignores it. But I absolutely think... Like, probably even before I did this research earlier, like last week, I probably wouldn't have even said it should be... I mean, I wouldn't have said, no, it shouldn't be canonized, but it would have been like, I don't care, it's a weird book. But, like, after really looking into it and, like, considering it more, I think it's pretty valuable.
Oh, yeah, it's like the it's like the comic relief in a serious movie. This is like
Yeah.
the romantic relief in an otherwise, at least in the Old Testament, otherwise like pretty desolate and fire and brimstone kind of book.
Oh yeah, big time. So yeah, I love it. And I said I wanted to end it on that question. I want to end it on a challenge though now. Here's my challenge for the listeners. There's a lot of similes, a lot of imagery used in this book. For instance, in the passage I mentioned, the guy says that she's stately as a palm tree. Her breasts are like the clusters of the vine. Your scent is like apples. Your kiss is like wine. He uses a lot of imagery. I think at one point he describes her neck as a tower. There's a lot of stuff like that. If anyone wants to go through this book, specifically I think there's a lot of stuff in chapters 4, 5, and 6, and maybe in 8, where he just describes her with a lot of weird similes and metaphors. If you want to draw a literal interpretation of a person with those actual body parts described the way they're described in the book, and send that to us, we will retweet the hell out of all of that. We will spread it out there. For as long as I've known anything about this book, I've wanted to see a well-drawn picture of this woman. And I haven't seen... I Googled it, and there are some, but they're not very good. This might be even specifically a challenge for Marika, but anyone who's up for the challenge, I would love so much to see this image. So please send it our way. We'll spread it out, and we're excited about that.
Make us a Frankenstein's monster of the Song of Solomon.
Right, exactly. That's kind of been a dream of mine for a while. So please help me out with that. And that's all I've got.
Cool. Well, you want to do the outro?
Sure, yeah. If you've got any questions, corrections, or suggestions for us, please send them to us at HellifWeKnowPodcast@gmail.com. We are at HellifWeKnow on Twitter and Instagram, and we do Facebook, and we're on YouTube. And most importantly, I think I've never made a big point of emphasis on this, but maybe I have. But I want to do it for sure this time. Give us a rating on iTunes or the Apple Podcast Store or whatever your system of podcast is, because that's supposed to make a difference. And I gave us a rating, and that really shouldn't count, but right now it's our only rating. So you should rate us, if only for the sake that the only rating for a podcast shouldn't come from one of the hosts.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to give it a rating because I on the computer I am the host.
Right. So that's the only reason
I tried, and it was like, you're not allowed to rate your own podcast.
Right. So unfortunately, we're really counting on you for this. So please, if you have anything good to say, rate us. If you have anything bad to say, lie and rate us positively. And
if the Bible has taught you anything, it's you should lie.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of moral ambivalence in human history, and it all gets venerated somehow. So, yeah, please give us ratings of any sort. I was kidding earlier, be honest. But especially if you like us, you should rate us positively, and we would very much appreciate that. And that's all I've got.
Bet.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks. See ya.